And today we're going to be talking about chapters 6 to 15 in John Boyne's The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, a very acclaimed modern classic used by thousands of teachers across the world. And so, yeah, today we're going to be reviewing those 10 chapters, which hopefully is going to be pretty fun. And then afterwards, I'm also going to be touching on some of the controversy behind this book, why some people have denounced it. And then afterwards, I just want to go on and introduce the sequel to this book. Tomorrow, I guess the next video, we'll be finishing the book, and then I want to talk more about the entire book overall, and then some last key themes that I felt were very important and stem from the books. And so let's dive right in. And so, okay, to begin with, chapter 6 is called The Overpaid Maid, which refers to Maria, right? What do you think is one of the best qualities of Bruno? And do you think that he's going to continue to be like that as he grows older? Or do you think that that quality will disappear as he gets older? And if you were Bruno, do you think that you would like Maria? Just think about, do you think that you would be comfortable talking to her? Or do you think that you would look down upon her, as some people do, like Gretel, right? Bruno's sister. How do you think that this quality really helped Bruno with Shmuel? Because now you've read up to chapter 15, so you're pretty clear, what happens, right? So how do you think that helped Bruno with Shmuel? I feel that because Bruno is younger, he has a more open mind towards not only concepts but also people, and I think that's why he became friends with Shmuel, because he just wanted to find somebody to play with, right? Because there were no friends for like miles around his house, right? And so he didn't really care that Shmuel was a Jew, and when he did find out, he didn't care at all. And I think that he has a more fair way of looking at these things. And why do you think so? What do you think will be a few reasons why, because Bruno's so young, he has a better, more balanced view of the world? Do you think that older people have that view? Like, have a more pure, cleaner view? Or do you think that no matter what, is still going to be a bit blemished? What do you think? Their view upon the world. Do you think it's still going to be as clear as like a child's? Some adults, right, are probably their perspective is probably going to be very clear, but do you think it will be perfectly clear? I feel that no, because, right, Bruno doesn't know anything. I'm really sorry to say this, Bruno, but he doesn't know anything about what country he lives in, who rules that country, the ideals that also rule the country, what's happening right beside his house, who his father is, what a Jewish person is, what a Nazi is, what a swastika or Star of David is, and he doesn't know at all what it is, right? And those are some of the main symbols of both being a Jewish person, of being a Nazi and a Jewish person, respectively. And so these are really important symbols, and therefore that means he doesn't even know about common things like the Hitler Youth and famous moments like Kristallnacht, the night of shattered broken glass, and yeah, he doesn't know a lot about what's happening, and so he has a clearer more pure view of the world. Meanwhile, an adult, no matter how purely they want to look at the world, they're always going to be bombarded by these opinions that even though they don't try to master, they unconsciously, kind of think about, right? And so maybe that's one thing. So yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think it's still possible for somebody to have a pure view? And of course, this is only my opinion. So yeah, what do you think? So one of the things that we find is that, well, even though Bruno doesn't really like his father at the moment, right? Maria says that he's still a good person because, he offered her a job and he also helped, paid for her mother's medical fees and also paid for the, burial and stuff. So do you think that it's possible for a person, like, just think about a Nazi, to be both good, very kind, and at the same time very cruel? Or do you think that as a person becomes really cruel, that even to people that, he thinks is a master superior race, right, the Aryan race, do you think that he still grows harder and crueler? What do you think? Do you think it's possible to be both? And we can also see that Gretel is pretty rude to Maria. And so, again, why do you think there's such a difference between Bruno and Gretel? Their age or some other factors? Do you think that Gretel knows more about social status, or do you think it's something else entirely? And in chapter 7, so Bruno sets up a tire swing, he falls, and so Lieutenant Kotler said something that Bruno doesn't really know to Pavel. I'm not very sure if I say Pavel or Pavel. I'm sorry, but I'm just gonna call him Pavel. But if I'm wrong, put it into the comments below if the comments are open. Sometimes for some reason they're closed. They just automatically close even if we open them. So if they're closed, then well, we will try to open them. But if you feel that there's another better pronunciation, then please comment. I'm just gonna call him Pavel. And so Lieutenant Kotler calls him something, right? It's never mentioned what that word is, but what do you think that it is? Jew? Or do you think it's some type of racial slur, which is definitely possible because, well, as we continue through the book, we really realize that, well, Pavel is not as respected as he would be if he were just a regular German. And of course, Jewish people are regular Germans. It's just that the Nazis created them and dehumanized them and did very inhumane and horrible things to them. But Lieutenant Kotler does not treat him like anybody else. So what do you think? And after Bruno gets hurt, Pavel helps him very well, right? Very professionally, in a very good, clean manner, quick manner. And so Bruno's shocked that Pavel's so good at all that, and it's revealed that Pavel is a doctor. Why do you think that he is now just a person who peels the vegetables and waits on the table? What do you think happened? Bruno has no clue, and he will not have any clue as he continues until the end. Why do you think that Pavel is not a doctor anymore? Probably because the Nazis did not. First of all Germans had to go into concentration camps, and all their businesses and shops and practices were all boarded down. And besides, I'm pretty sure German doctors probably did not want to compete with Jewish doctors. And why do you think that Bruno's mother said that she had done it? What do you think is the reason behind that? And so I think that one of the styles that John Boyne has is that he doesn't answer some questions and leaves a lot of open ends. He never actually says that the Fury is Hitler. It's obvious, right? And Auschwitz is what is right beside Bruno's house. It's people who know history or people who just if they read the book and they sort of put the pieces together, they kind of know. So there's a lot of open ends here, right? There's never anything that says this is World War II. Like the situation is World War II. So we, the Germans versus the German people versus who terrorized Jewish people. And it's obvious that it's World War II, but there's never anything that says specifically, like straight out, that it's World War II. And so again, there's no real explanation for this, which leaves us thinking, why do you think that Bruno's mother decided not to take credit for something that she hadn't done? I think the reason for that is because Bruno's racist father probably would not have liked it if he learned that his son had been touched and treated by a Jewish doctor, right? As the commandant of Auschwitz, Bruno's father probably would not appreciate that, right? And so another question that I have is, in chapter 8, grandmother storms out, right? So this is a flashback, and so here their grandmother is very, very upset because her son is now a commandant, and so she asks what she did wrong, why she is now why her son is wearing that uniform. And so it's clear that she isn't much of a big fan of Nazi ideals. And again, remember that not everybody supported the Nazis in Germany. I think that's a very some people don't get that, but it wasn't just a few people. There were a lot of people, Germans, kind Germans, brave Germans who not only protected Jewish people by offering them shelter secretly at the risk of their own lives, but really opposed Nazi Germany as well. And so I also think that another really important thing about this is that Boyne offers a more three-dimensional perspective of a person, of German people during World War II Germany, right? Because Bruno, for example, we would expect a typical Nazi Germany boy to kind of, right? Back then there was the Hitler Youth, right? We would probably expect him to be marching, right? Listening to racist propaganda. But Bruno's nothing like that. He's kind-hearted. He's been cold and steely. He's a regular boy, and a very kind-hearted boy at that as well. More kind-hearted than regular people, actually. How do you think that Ralph, right, who is Bruno's father, how do you think that he could have become, a Nazi commandant if even his own mother does not support it? What do you think? And so, of course, this is another great chance to learn history. The history of World War II is fascinating. It can be brutal and cruel, but at the same time, there's a lot of aspects of it that are amazing. And you should definitely learn more about this. I recommend an amazing book that has won the Newbery Honor Award called Hitler Youth, along with most of Steve Schenken's books, which are amazing as well. Why do you think that he became a Nazi? So chapter 9 says that Bruno remembers that he used to enjoy exploration, right? And if you were Bruno and you had nothing to do, what would you do? Do you think you would explore? Or do you think you would just read, stay inside, and not do anything? What do you think about exploring? Do you think it's fun or just dangerous, hot, cold, and kind of miserable? And so one thing I really wanted to say was that can you spot any symbolism? And I'm going to kind of make this easy. Not symbolism, but like some foreshadowing actually, in the, on page 102. I know that it's going to be different for everybody, but basically, the last page in chapter 9. Can you spot any? I saw this foreshadowing. So, he was reading this bronze plaque. It says, presented on the occasion of the opening of, and again, it's Auschwitz camp. He can't say that, so he says out with camp. And then he says June 1940. And then, quote, and then there's a quote. It's a quote, he reached out and touched it for a moment. And the bronze was very cold. So he pulled his fingers away before taking a deep breath and beginning his journey. Right? It was very cold. Like the entire camp was very cold. And it's true. It was a prison, a death camp, a concentration camp, a place where a lot of terrible things happened. People were and over 1 million people were killed. It was a very bad place. And the fact that the bronze was cold and then he quickly pulled his fingers away like he didn't like it, I feel that was a pretty good foreshadowing. In chapter 10, he meets Shmuel, right? And Shmuel, and so if you were Bruno and you saw this strange boy, right? And so remember that, Shmuel looks very strange to you. He's shaved, he's very, he has a bald head, he's very skinny, and he's just sitting there alone, right? Do you think you would have the courage to go up to him? Sure, Bruno does not know and does not have any racist ideas about, like Jewish people aren't human, which, and those are some of the very terrible things that were talked about in Nazi Germany, right? And, he doesn't have any of those ideas, but just, if you're Bruno, would you have the courage to go up to, Shmuel anyway, right? And remember, you don't know that Shmuel is a very kind and sensitive and generous person. Well, a very good person, right? You don't know that. So, do you think you would have the courage to go or not? And Bruno and Shmuel are very similar in a lot of ways. First of all, they're exactly the same age, right? And both of them are in the same place, right? They're alone. They don't really have anybody to play with, and along with that, both of them came to Auschwitz against their will. And one thing I just want to say is that during all this, Bruno does not understand what's happening. Even at the end, he does not understand what is happening. And so, yeah, he never understands really the concept of what Auschwitz is. And so I feel that, again, this is a very important part of the book. And so always keep in mind that Bruno really does not know anything. And so I think that this is really an important part, because I've been with some people who have been very frustrated by Bruno, and so I just want to remind them sometimes, look, Bruno does not know anything. If you had not known anything about at that point, you probably would have acted the same way as well. So just keep that in mind. And let's go on to the next chapter. Chapter 11. And do you think there's going to be a nice friendship between them, or do you think that's not going to happen? And then there was the Fury, right? I'm not really going to talk a lot about that, but again, this also shows Bruno does not know anything about Fury or the Führer or Hitler, right? And so he just, all he can think is that the Führer was Hitler was a very bad guest and probably the rudest guest, right? And so I'm not really going to talk a lot about that. So in chapter 11, I think that I feel pretty confident that we can skip it. Sure, it is important, but then again, we have a lot to cover, and yeah, let's go on to chapter 12. And Schwab explains, right? The Nazis took everything from them, made them go to a ghetto in Krakow, and then boarded them onto very tight cattle cars and got them to Auschwitz, right? And Bruno's very frustrated because Bruno says, is everybody packed together, right? And they were so packed together that mostly a lot of people died because of suffocation. They were packed together in cattle cars. They had to stand for hours on end. It was a horrible experience. And Bruno was frustrated because he was saying, no. There are doors at the end. And if you go through the doors, then there's like these buffets. And if you go past the doors, then there's like a lot of luxurious seating places. He's German, and so he doesn't know that. And so sometimes Bruno can be frustrating. Bruno, he acts like Schmel and him are very similar, when in reality, but sure, their story goes along the same lines, but in very different consequences. Bruno still has a very good life, right? Just being told to move to a 3-story house, right? A very good 3-story house with servants and maids and cooks. I mean, that's a very luxurious life compared to Schmel's situation, right? He's now in a prison camp. His family's being overworked. Probably some of them have probably been killed already, because that was a very sad reality. Others have been starved. People were killed for just things like if they were like working really hard, very intense working, and because of their hard work, which they didn't even choose, the Nazis made them do it. And if they just lost a button, sometimes they would be shot just because of that. It was a very terrible thing, very terrible atrocity. And yet Bruno kind of acts like they have the same thing. And I just want to admire Schmel for not saying anything, for not being really mean to Bruno, for being one of the people who tormented him. Of course, Bruno's not one of them, right? It's not his fault. But at the same time, I feel that there's a lot of people only think about Bruno, and so I think that we should really admire Schmel as well. And so, do you think that Bruno will grow to understand more? Sure, like I said before, he doesn't truly understand everything, but do you think he's going to develop more sympathy and he's going to develop a better understanding of what's going to happen? And do you think that if Bruno had been slightly older, both of them slightly older, let's just say Gretel's age, 13 years old, okay? Do you think that they would have had the same friendship as they had? Or do you think it would have been different? Just 4 years. Actually, 5 years. I'm not very sure, but at some points they're 8 and at some points they're 9. So I'm not very sure. But I think that at that point they would be 8. So that would be 5 years actually. What do you think? I think that they wouldn't have gotten to be friends as close, as quickly. What about you? And afterwards, in chapter 13, Bruno and Schmel talk more. And before you read this book, did you even imagine such a thing happening? Or not? And of course, remember that this is a fictional piece of work. And in the next video, instead of talking about chapters 16 to 20, which we will do, I want to talk about all of the ways that the boy in the striped pajamas has a lot of things wrong. And of course, without those things wrong, I'm pretty sure that the book couldn't have become such a classic. But still, as a historical expert and a person who really likes facts to be facts, I do want to share a bit of those, because it can share some falsehoods about the Holocaust as well. Though it's a very enlightening, amazing book. Remember, it's used by a lot of teachers all over the world. Next, Lieutenant Kotler becomes very nervous as Bruno's father begins to question him about Kotler's father, right? And why do you think he's like that? And probably because he doesn't want to be linked with somebody who doesn't like Nazi Germany, right? He's trying to advance. He's trying to go up the ranks. That won't help him, right? And finally, when Pavel, who is really weak, probably because of being underfed, overworked, and just being stressed out all the time because of the prison camp, drops a bottle of wine, Lieutenant Kotler becomes very angry. And we don't really actually know what happened, but I think that it was a very bad thing, and yeah, I think that really degraded everybody's view of Lieutenant Cutler a bit. Except, of course, for a few people, for example, Bruno's parents, but mostly in the eyes of Bruno and maybe Gretel. I'm not very sure about that. So in chapter 14, why do you think Shmuel has a black eye? How do you think that happened? And then we're gonna go on to chapter 15. I did review chapter 14, but I don't think there's a lot to talk about. You know, Bruno telling a perfectly reasonable lie, but you can review that further if you want, but I just want to go on to chapter 15. And so Bruno, when he did not defend Shmuel against Lieutenant Cutler, and so why do you think he did that, right? Because he was terrified, right? Do you think that you would have defended Shmuel? And think about it, you're terrified. Lieutenant Cutler is a very mean person, and if he's just looming over you, shouting, and he's older than you, how do you think that you would react? Would you not say anything? And that's a perfectly reasonable response, because people will be terrified, right? And how do you think this reflects, not only reflects the general feeling in Germany? It's not only Bruno. A lot of people were scared to silence, right? Even Germans who opposed the Nazis could not say anything, because if they even said one thing, if they just made a joke about Hitler, most of them would either be killed, gotten out of their job, or sent to concentration camps where they would be overworked, underfed, and then killed. It was a very terrible reality, and so nobody wanted to go against the Nazis. Even if they hated the Nazis, showing any sign would mean certain, at least very bad things would happen to you. The worst will be death. The least worst thing will probably be concentration camps, or at least a very big black mark on your record. And if you get a certain number of black marks, then of course you would go to a concentration camp. It was a very deadly reality. And if you were Shmuel, how would you respond afterwards? Would you feel betrayed? Would you even forgive Bruno? Even if Bruno, said he was sorry, do you think you will forgive Bruno or not? Would you just think, it's just another boy who wants to trick me? And I'm sure Bruno does bring him food, but at the same time, would you still trust him if you were Shmuel? I don't know. And I think that, again, Shmuel is should really be more talked about, because it really is something to not complain about all the horrible things that are happening in Auschwitz, and try to not let it disturb their friendship. And so it's a very admirable thing to do, and so I just wanted to point that out. Next time, like I said before, I'm going to be talking about some faults of the Boy in the Striped Pajamas, and along with the next book, the sequel to the Boy in the Striped Pajamas, All of the Broken Places. And also the last 5 chapters of the book as well. And so I hope that you enjoyed this video. So we covered a grand part of the Boy in the Striped Pajamas. And I do want to point out that there are some very big major themes in the book, but mostly through the book itself there isn't a lot to talk about. But overall, the big picture is very interesting. So next video might be more interesting, but hopefully you really enjoyed this video again. And I'll see you next time. Keep reading, and my goal is to talk about more classics. So I'm also planning a series on The Book Thief, Call of the Wild, and White Fang. And so I hope that you enjoy those, and I'll see you next time. Bye!